Hi Fude lovers, welcome back. Today I'll be speaking about my favorite Rephr brushes. I taped some of the ferrules so you can focus on the brush heads. A few notes before I begin. White bristles are hard to film, so please excuse any overexposure. I've tried most Rephr brushes and played with them over the span of 2 years. Their hairs are overall less soft and coarser than my Hakuhodo and Chikuhodo Seikoho hairs, with the exception of the 1 and 6, which are softer than the Hakuhodo J5523 and Takumi T1. I've also read online that other people's Rephr brushes are softer or as soft as their Hakuhodo brushes, so it depends on the batch of hairs that you get. They have some great deals from time to time, so I recommend keeping an eye out for them. In terms of handles, they offer 2 types, one with a silver ferrule and black handle, and another with all matte black ferrules and handles. I suggest the matte black one since the silver ones tarnish. This is the 23. It's an extremely tiny detail brush I use for inner corner highlight. Here's a size comparison with the 3 on the left. It picks up jelly powders like NARS highlighters well, but the top of the ferrule digs into the product when used laterally. So, sorry, it's hard to see because the brush is so small, but you can see the product is on the ferrule right here. I have to use it at an angle or perpendicularly to pick up the product. I also have to use it at an angle when applying it to the face. It applies very pigmented and maintains the vibrant finish of the product. This is my first Rephr True Love, the 1. It's a flat multi-purpose brush that I use for shading and blending. It shares the same shape as the Hakuhodo J5523 and MAC 217, which I typically dislike. Here it is compared with the J5523 on the left. The hairs of the 1 feel thicker and softer on the lids compared to the J5523, but the Hakuhodo is a lot older and some of the hair tips probably broke off, which is why it's a lot scratchier to me. It grabs and deposits color easier due to the thicker hairs. Doesn't overblend or go up too high on the lid. This brush is perfect to me and backup worthy. I wholeheartedly adore it and recommend it. The H2 is the prototype of the 2. So the 2 is on the left. Both are flat lid brushes I use for packing on lid color. It's soft and places color well and keeps the glitters from the shadow. It seems to be modeled after the Hakuhodo J004G on the left, but a bit denser. The head is larger with longer hairs and has less resistance than the 2. So let me see if I can try to show you. Here's the resistance of the H2. So it's pretty bendy. And then we have the 2, which is like a lot denser and has less give. I wish the 2 could consistently have the same hairs as the H2, as the H2 has much softer hairs. I also wish Rephr could make an official version of the H2. This is the 2. Compared to the H2, the 2 has blunt tips. So the H2 is on the left. It seems to be modeled after the MAC 239. Between the H2 on the left and the 2 on the right, I prefer the shape and softness of the 2, but I do really like both brushes. The tapered head and flexibility gives me more control when I'm placing the lid color on the inner half or third of the lid. With the 2, I have to work harder at applying the product and it hurts my lids afterwards if I sweep with it. If I pat the color on my lid on a less sensitive day, it doesn't hurt and applies shimmers well. It works well with applying pigmented shimmers and matte shades without shearing out the color. This is kind of hard to show on camera, but it's denser than both the Hakuhodo J004G and MAC 239. So the Hakuhodo is on the far left, the MAC is in the middle, and the 2 is on the right. Once again, this is the J004G on the left, the MAC 239 in the middle, and the Rephr 2 on the right. In terms of softness, the J004G, MAC 239, and H2 are all softer than my 2. It also has the least resistance compared to the others as it is the densest. For performance between the MAC 239 and 2, the MAC is softer on the lids, but since it's less dense, it doesn't pick up or apply as much pigment as the 2. There's trade-offs since the 2 has blunt tips and is scratchier than the 239 but applies heavier. Here's another comparison with the Hakuhodo J424G on the left. This is a great dupe for the MAC 239 since the natural goat hair version got discontinued. The P09B is the prototype of the 20. It's a fan brush I use for light to medium cheekbone highlight. I generally don't like fan brushes, and this is the only one that I like. The head is a lot smaller than the Hakuhodo J4004 on the left. And I can see this in person, but it probably won't show up on camera. If I put the head of the 20 or the P09B on top of the Hakuhodo, you can see that the Hakuhodo is larger. The head of the Rephr on the right is also a bit denser. The Hakuhodo on the left is wider, while the Rephr on the right is a little bit more compact, width-wise. It applies soft to medium press highlighters smoothly. I prefer the shape of the Rephr on the right over the Hakuhodo. I don't like brushes with really wide heads because it makes it harder to get into the product. And both brushes have a harder time picking up hard press products. This is the P08, which is now the 19. The hairs are 38 millimeters long, which shares the same hair length as the Hakuhodo Takumi T5. It's smaller than the T5, which I prefer because I think the T5 is way too big for highlight and the tapered tip is too long. I really like it with hard press blushes. It applies blush in a targeted area due to the short taper. It can overblend if swept with too much, so better to pat product on, then blend lightly. The brush shape allows you to apply blush at an angle. Instead of the blush being horizontally across the face, it shows up at an angle. The application is great for slimming the face. There are some cons I want to mention. My brush in particular is bundled very unevenly, and you can see on the side that the head is lopsided and wonky looking. The 19 on their website looks much better bundled and less pointy at the top. My 90B or 19 hurts my face more than the 6 on less sensitive days. If the hairs were much softer and it was better bundled like the Takumi series, it would be perfect. This is the 22 prototype with the gold ferrule. It's a large, fluffy bronzer brush with an oval ferrule. The shape is similar to the discontinued Tom Ford bronzer brush. It's softer than the Tom Ford bronzer brush and a bit softer than the official 22. I've washed them both 2 to 3 times to get the conditioner off and determine the actual softness. The prototype applies bronzer smoothly and blends without over-diffusing. It gives a medium finish with setting powder. I prefer it for bronzer over setting powder, but it is a bronzer brush after all. Compared to the 22 on the right, it's soft enough for sensitive skin, but if you can't use Sokoho or Ototsuho, I would advise against getting it. With a Milani Baked Bronzer, I swiped in 3 times, and I actually prefer the application of the prototype as it applies and blends a lot better. With the Tom Ford Bronzer, I swiped 3 times as well, and it applied light and slightly diffused, so it gave a similar finish to the Hakuhodo J531. You may have gotten a 22 that has softer hairs or performs better than mine. It really varies depending on the hair batch, bundling, skin type, and application styles. With loose setting powder, the 22 scratched my face and applied kind of cakey on the dry areas. On the other hand, a friend with dry, non-sensitive skin really likes it for loose setting powder. I think it's a great bronzer brush overall and like it more than the Tom Ford bronzer brush. I thought it would be fun to compare the Hakuhodo fan with the 22 for powder. The 22 applies setting powder quicker since the head is much larger. It's about double the size of the Hakuhodo fan. The 22 hurts in a sweeping motion across my face, and I can't get into the smaller areas since it's so big. Granted, it's not marketed as a powder brush, but a lot of brushes can be multi-purpose. It really shines with bronzer. It blends easily, quickly without over diffusing, and the edges aren't harsh or blotchy. With the Hakuhodo fan, the hairs are softer, but the brush is older than the 22, so that could be why. It applies setting powder a little bit lighter than the 22 and feels a lot better when swept across the face on the side. It gives a medium setting powder finish. You can get into the smaller areas of the face as the brush fits almost perfectly underneath the eye and next to the nose. I used it on the tips with a baked bronzer. It applies pigmented in a targeted area, similar to how you want contour to look like. You can blend it out if you sweep back and forth, but I prefer the 22 for bronzer overall. The last honorable mention is the 6. It's discontinued now, but at one point they also called it the 11. It's a big fluffy brush for both setting and finishing powder. It's not soft enough for my extremely sensitive skin, but a friend who has dry, non-sensitive skin loves this brush. If you don't have sensitive skin and are able to find it somewhere, I recommend picking it up. Lastly isn't a favorite of mine, but I think a lot of people would be interested in this brush. The 23 is a dense and puffy cheek brush, reminiscent of the Tom Ford cheek brush, Hakuhodo J5543, and Wayne Goss 12. Think of it as if the Tom Ford and J5543 or Wayne Goss 12 had a baby. The shape is very similar to the Hakuhodo J5543 or Wayne Goss 12 on the right, with a denser body like the Tom Ford cheek. So the Wayne Goss 12 has not been put in a brush guard either, and they're both pretty fluffy and puffed out, but the Rephr 23 on the left is much denser. Here we have the Rephr 23 on the left, which was not in a brush guard, the Wayne Goss 12 in the middle, which is also not in a brush guard, and the Tom Ford 6 or the Tom Ford cheek on the right, which was in a brush guard. So here it is compared with the Tom Ford cheek on the right, which I washed and did not put in a brush guard. Tom Ford's and Wayne Goss's 12 hairs are softer. I would imagine Hakuhodo's J5543 also to be softer. Both sides and the top of the head don't scratch my skin on a good skin day, but the top does poke it when I'm more sensitive. It takes some going back and forth to blend a hard-pressed bronzer like Tom Ford's. And that's with 4 swipes. It picked up a lot of the glitter, and it kind of blended okay, on my arm at least. I had an easier time picking up the Clinique Cheek Pop formula, but it applies in too large of a surface area for blush for my liking since the head is so wide and large. It applies Tarte Amazonian clay blushes a bit better than Clinique Cheek Pops, so I like it with the Tarte formula the most. So Clinique is on the left and Tarte is on the right, and I had to do a lot more swipes with the Clinique compared to the Tarte. The Clinique was like 6 or 7 swipes, and I can barely see it on my wrist, whereas the Tarte I did like 4 swipes, and it's better blended and it looks more pigmented. I hope this was helpful to those of you considering what to get from Rephr. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in my next video. Bye!